Hi, um, so my name is Ynanna. Some of you know me as Carmen, and I'm just making this video to share some of my feelings about this next part of my journey. Um, I'm 27 years old. I'm Afro-Dominicana, born and raised in the Bronx. I went to SUNY New Paltz for my bachelor's in television and radio productions and Black Studies. I have written a book called Hija de mi Madre, which is about the Afro-Latina identity. I am also a birth doula. So, a lot of people always ask me, how did I get from writing about the Afro-Latina identity and presenting in colleges and universities about that to wanting to be a midwife? Well, on my journey to discovering my Afro-Latina identity, I started to also ask myself a lot about womanhood and what that meant in relation to my blackness, to my Latinidad. And that's when I started to explore how I've seen wellness around me growing up through my mother, through my relatives. And through my spiritual work in college, I started to connect to my feminine body and what that meant, and being metaphoric, as a poet, like what does it mean on a spiritual sense, on a literal sense, to be a woman. So being in college gave me the opportunity to get in touch with my reproductive system and my yoni, and like send that place in my body love, because this world encourages women to hate that part of themselves, to be ashamed of their vaginas and their bodies and their sexuality. And I had, a lot of work to do, and I think many of us do, and I'll still be working on myself and growing every day as a woman. But what I learned in college, when I was able to learn in college, was that my menstruation and my body and my sexuality were something that I could use for myself and not for someone else. So, in discovering that and becoming proud of that, I started thinking about, well, what was my childhood and girlhood dreams as I was developing this? And my family members would always say that I would always wanted to be a doctor, a teacher, or and a mother. And I gave that up somewhere along the way because I thought I wasn't good enough. And so in college, my friend Caroline, she asked me, what was my favorite game? And I immediately answered doctor, mother, teacher. And so as I started to reflect on that, I realized that I would always be jealous when my friends would tell me that there were like doctors and nurses. And so I was like, well, why am I jealous? Because that's what I want to do. I want to be a healer and like some kind of medical professional. So first I started with the holistic health counselor track. I was like, well, let me learn more about how food and emotions and our thoughts affect our body. And through that process, I started learning more about my body as a woman and becoming more and more interested in pursuing some type of medical profession that helped women, because that's my special interest. And somehow, like slowly, the holistic health counselor started to transition into wanting to be like a counselor for women, especially during childbirth and motherhood. And then that's when I trained to be a doula. And my training as a doula was through a fellowship in which I was able to receive my certification through helping three low-income families. And in that course of my training, I also started to learn more about, well, what was the condition for women of color birthing. And through learning what the conditions were, I was like, well, this is directly connected to my work, because a lot of women of color and Latinas experience racism and language barriers and economic barriers to be able to get adequate reproductive health services and also maternal health services. So in my training as a doula, I realized, okay, that we need more Black and Latina doulas and midwives. And so I was like, well, that's what I want to do. And this fits perfectly into wanting to help people women heal through food and their emotions and in a holistic sense. I also became a doula first because I wasn't sure if I wanted to make the jump into being a midwife. I was still scared. But let me tell you, my first birth, I attended a woman that only spoke Spanish. And that experience was really scary for me because at the time I wasn't confident with my ability to speak Spanish. But I knew after that first birth that I had to be a midwife. Like, I knew that I needed to be able to give her much more help from start to finish, from conception and when she found out she was pregnant until after, during the birth and after the birth. And so I continued to serve women, and each woman taught me just a beautiful lesson about in like the individuality of birth and the emotions and the different types of births that the woman as herself birthing herself into a mother experience. And that made me want to be more and more a midwife throughout the last 3 years. So that's also where my belly cast project came from, and I got to meet more mothers and support more mothers, and like just more and more just realize I just want to be taking care of pregnant women. Like, I have the ability to help them feel so good, and I want to be able to do that. So that pushed me and pushed me and pushed me to get my midwifery education. And last year I decided to go the certified nurse midwife path. And throughout that process, I realized that I needed to like take care of myself because I had been dealing for a lot of my life with mental health concerns and issues and health. And in the middle of like the first semester of my nursing um, education, I had to withdraw from school because I had a panic attack and a nervous breakdown from all the stress that I had been carrying throughout all of these years of transition and strife and figuring out myself and how to relate to my my family and my friends and all these different changes, in addition to dealing with years of depression and anxiety. So at first I was really upset when I had this breakdown last year, but going that breakdown forced me to, and willingly, not just forced, go to therapy for for like a few months intensively, and really working and writing like everything out and doing incredible healing work on myself. And that's when I realized that, one, the certified nurse midwife wasn't my heartfelt path, that I really actually wanted to be a certified professional midwife, to be able to be trained traditionally and through apprenticeship and in birth centers and in birth clinics to give a model of care that's mother centered and is focused on the natural view of birth, as opposed to a path like looking at it as a disease. This is pathologized in hospitals. um so that's when I decided to apply to Maternidad La Luz. And the reason I would wanted to go to Maternidad La Luz is because, as a Latina and as someone whose first language is Spanish, I know what it's like to be in a hospital and not speak English. I have seen the way doctors speak to people who don't speak English, and it is not okay. It is just not okay. They talk to them, they talk to us like with really high voices as though that's going to make us understand better, and just completely disrespectful. And when they assume you don't understand, they do or give you whatever they feel like it. Not all doctors, but that is what I've seen with the care that low income communities who have a higher concentration of immigrants and people who don't speak English and are people of color, you don't have the best care. So I also knew that when I was thinking about how do I want to be trained as a midwife, I knew that I wanted to make sure I could communicate these ideas about holistic health and maternal wellness also in Spanish. So Maternidad La Luz is a clinic in El Paso, Texas, where I will be serving Mexican and Mexican American women pretty much all in Spanish. Like, all of my consultas and citas and appointments with them are going to be straight in Spanish. And I just feel that we need to do something. And I mean all of us. And whether that be communicating and sharing with our friends and family the ideas that we know about hospitals, and how some hospitals and some healthcare providers don't have their patients' interests necessarily in mind. Not all health providers, but hospitals in and of themselves tend to be very medicalized and do unnecessary procedures to women, and don't always treat women with respect. There's a history of hospitals and our government and our politicians and all of our systems not respecting women's power and their ability to choose. So I'm answering this calling to be a midwife, to be and continue to be educated as a woman's health provider, so that I can also serve my sisters, my Latina sisters, and promote the birth of healthier generations. A lot of our issues do stem from birth, stem from the way our mothers were treated while they were pregnant, what they were feeling, and how they were treated when we were born. Our communities have been attacked and our family structures have been destroyed by the government, by the system, particularly from the times of the enslavement. The enslavement was probably the single most devastating blow that has been delivered to Afro-descendant and indigenous people in the world. Straight up. And so we're still recovering from that trauma, and that trauma keeps getting passed on and on to generations, through our own familiar and communal relations, but also through the perpetuation of oppression by the dominant system that right now controls our livelihood and our self-determination. So in all the other grassroots work that we are all doing to liberate our people from oppression, I feel like my way of doing direct action is midwifery, because I will be there counteracting some kind of level of systematic violence to our women, so that we can start to break the chains of trauma and oppression. We need our women to be well. We need our future generations to be well, so that we can pass on the work that we're doing of liberating ourselves and our people of all shades and colors and ethnicities and creeds from the shackles of white suprematic, patriarchal, and capitalist control. My desire to be a midwife is from my heart. It's from my mother, and it's for mothers around the world. It's for myself. I want to be a midwife so that I can continue to follow my heart and what my heart loves most. Like, when I tell you that I can almost start crying when I think about how I've been able to help certain women in my life that have been pregnant, and I can't tell you like how wide I smile every time I get a phone call because my friend is pregnant. Because almost all of my friends, when they get pregnant, or friends or like acquaintances, when they are pregnant, or even when they have some kind of like woman related reproductive system issue, I get a phone call or a text or an email, and that fills me with joy, because I'm like, wow, women trust me to help them, and that's what I've wanted to do my whole life. I feel like what makes my heart happy is being able to touch other people, because when I touch other people, I feel like I've shared with someone, I've connected with someone, I've helped to like create community, and also have helped to heal them a little more and heal myself a little more, because I learned from the experience and we both learned. There's a mutual learning, and we don't have enough love going around the world, and what makes me want to be a midwife is that I'm able to offer that love to a woman, and in turn to an entire future generation. So thank you.